This will be a day long remembered. Now I am the master.
Welcome to another episode of Legends and Theories, and welcome to my review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2003 seasons 4 and 5. And initially, I was just going to do this, as I mentioned in the weekly update, just as a video looking at seasons 4 to 7. But when I realized that season 6 and 7 were more specialized seasons, and this one also told a unique story arc, as did seasons 1 to 3, dealing with Utram Shredder. This one deals with the downfall of the Utram Shredder's empire and the rise and fall of the Demon Shredder. While season 6 is the future season, and season 7 is the return to the present season. So I think that it works better to talk about these as different sections and in different videos. Plus, it's going to get better looking thumbnails for each. So, going into the beginning of season 4, this was mainly just different episodes, mainly set around the farmhouse. And with it, these episodes were fine. The most interesting thing in this is the storyline that Leo follows Leo and him just being angry and wanting to become just better and better after them failing to defeat the Shredder, and the only way for them to actually win was for them to kill themselves, and only a complete miracle managed to save them and have the Shredder be imprisoned. And I think this is just a really great storyline for him to go through. It is just it's just really well done with him, and it is just really compelling. Things do get more interesting when they return to New York after just having some of this time to mainly just recover from their injuries that they suffered from their final battle with the Utram Shredder. And going through this, they go up against Hun a few times, and also go up against Agent Bishop. And going through that, I think it's interesting. There's also the storylines where things are getting a little more intense, and Leo's just continuing on this downward spiral. And yeah, there's some solid ones. They finally get to the best part in Leo's story, where after the visit from Usagi and the one rhino guy, that Leo just is shown to be completely helpless from getting others' help, at least in their home, to be able to fully recover from the mental injuries that he's suffering, or the trauma, and having to figure out something to do to calm himself down. So Splinter sends him to meet with the person who trained his master, and that was honestly just an interesting story for him to do. The character of the Ancient One was interesting, and yeah, it was a very predictable, Yoda-like thing where they have the character that's very unsuspecting of being the powerful being when they actually are. And I mean, this is just a very common trope to use now, although I think it was not as common when they did it with Yoda, but now it's just a very predictable thing. I was You'll see this video with it soon. I was watching Teen Titans, and I'm towards the end of that. But with that, there's another episode just like this where they have the unsuspecting character who actually turns out to be the master. So yeah, those storylines are they're predictable, but still, it's still a solid story. And I think his training and him realizing he shouldn't be this angry and needs to learn to lighten up a little and not be taking things so seriously. It was a solid conclusion to that story, and having Leo return to being who he was at the end of the last season. But yeah, going through more of this, there is many other interesting things. There's the entire like outbreak storyline, and that was pretty interesting to see where the really obvious thing with Donatello was going on, but it still was a solid story. And him eventually mutating was pretty dark, but there was also that pretty disturbing one where Baxter Stockman makes himself a new body and then just kind of loses it. But that was also interesting. Another fun one was just the tale of kind of everything that happened before Hamada Yoshi went to New York and how that all wound up. There's just a straight up murder in this, and it goes, and that shows just honestly just really interesting things. The Utram Shredder was a his return in this, and this is because it's a flashback, and we see how well one thing I was concerned about earlier in it was Hamayoshi also a Utram, but he wasn't. He was just a man who went and defended them, and his death was more tragic. We see how Splinter was taken in, and just a very tragic origin story with him, and everything that eventually leads to his death. And yeah, that's honestly just it was just really insane to go see him go on this kind of revenge mission and go and just commit this murder of someone who was once like his brother. And I think this is more interesting when they did this in the later Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, where it's a very similar story to this, but Monoyoshi becomes Splinter, and the brother is Oto Kosaki, who is Shredder. So while I did prefer the origin story that way in the later version of it, this was still a really solid story. Then going to the next one, there is one where they go and fight the character Samantha Romero. It was interesting, but they're just kind of going back in time and wasn't as interesting as the previous one, which had that really devastating fight against Shredder in the future and going to those other times and realities. Then the next part is it's pretty interesting where Donatello does fully submit to that mutation that happened a little earlier in the season when the outbreak began and turns into this giant turtle monster. And it was a really interesting story, which I did have to take a little bit of a break in because when I was at this part is when Mask of Fear came out, so I tried to get through it, the rest of the episodes, but I was just tired that night and I was realizing that it would be better for me to watch these after I finished Mask of Fear so I could fully enjoy them, and I did. It was a really solid story, then being able to hear him after going and unknowingly freeing the Shredder's Mystics to go and eventually free him. It is just pretty interesting, and there's also, I believe, at the end of one of these, I don't remember which one it was, there is the Ancient One going and asking the Ninja Tribunal not to go and recruit the Turtles, but they said they've already made the decision. And the Ninja Tribunal ultimately shows up at the end of the season, and they abduct the Turtles and a few other members that work with them, and they first don't know what's going on. Think they may be evil, but ultimately we learn that they are good people and that they are trying to prevent the rise of the actual Shredder, who is a demon who took over the body of the original Orokusaki and the Shredder that they fought earlier in the season was someone that was just taking up the identity, and that sets up a really intense season, which I'm pretty sure was intended to be the last season. It feels very much like that, and the storyline does feel like it wraps everything up with really well at the end of season 5, but they did get 2 more seasons of it, so those are one of the other main factors because it did feel like season 5 was the end, and then they decided to put in season 6 and then season 7 to go and continue the story. But going into season 5, that was honestly a really interesting season, also. It's also a lot shorter than all the other seasons besides the final one, which is another thing that makes me think that this is intended to be the final season because all the other ones were, I believe, 22 episode seasons, and this one was only I believe, was 12 or 13, or actually, I was going down. It's a 12 episode season, and all the other seasons they were 26 episodes. So this was under half of the amount of all the other seasons besides 7. 7 is a few episodes longer than this, with it being 14, but again, as I said, I think that the season here was very clearly intended to be the final season. They got renewed for another season and went with the future storyline because they really didn't have too many more stories to have be set up for this universe because they went and really wrapped everything up. At the end, they had some just really interesting things. Oh, and then one thing I completely forgot to mention with season 4 was something that was in the back of my mind, but I completely missed it, which was Karai becoming the next Shredder and building up her own Foot Clan and Empire, and the Turtles having to go up against her because she wants revenge for them taking her father away. And it was a natural progression of the character going and wanting to cross this line because she wanted revenge, and it shows how revenge clouds people. She was at least a partially an ally before, but now she is a full-on antagonist and just fully out for blood, and that was a really interesting thing to see in the season. But yeah, it's also really interesting in that one episode where she goes and nearly kills all the turtles while Leonardo is with the Ancient One. I'm so glad I didn't miss that because that was one of the best parts of the season, and it was in the back of my mind. And then I started talking about something else and nearly forgot to go back there. But going back to season 5 now, the first, I believe it's 8 episodes, are fully focused just on the turtles and their allies training and getting the different parts of the Shredder's mask and gauntlet to be returned to be kept safe so the original Shredder isn't revived. And it was honestly just a really interesting storyline as they went and got the stuff back together and they learned more about the history and just how evil this original Shredder is. It's getting just more and more intense, and then the Foot Clan Mystics go and attack, and they manage to go and defeat really everyone, seemingly kill everyone. But since this is a kid show, they really couldn't kill anyone. Well, I mean, besides the characters of like Kumano Yoshi and his brother, who, I mean, I guess they did kill those guys, but yeah, really, they couldn't kill any like major main characters that they grew to love and spent some good amount of time with. But yeah, honestly, it was just pretty interesting to see. They return to New York, and there they have to try and save Cry because Shredder wants to basically get revenge on her for taking his identity, and he attacks her. They do barely manage to save her, and they have to go and try to save New York, but They fail, at least temporarily, but then go to manage to team up with a bunch of different allies and really everyone they've met throughout the series to go and attack the Shredder at the end, and this ultimately is able to make them victorious, and they do manage to ultimately kill this evil version of Shredder, and it was a really satisfying battle at the end. It was really just every single character that they kind of went up against teaming up together. They had to make alliances with Bishop, Hun, and teaming up with the Justice Force. It was honestly a really solid, entertaining story, and I think it was done well. And just going through really everything, it was an interesting storyline. I think that everything was well done, and this was very clearly intended to be the end of the show. But then it did get renewed, and I'll be talking about those in other videos. But still, I think that it was a really entertaining 2 seasons. It goes and instead of undoing its decision with the Utram Shredder and bringing him back once again as antagonist, it still finds a way to use their most popular antagonist being the Shredder, with first it being Cry and then them having a demonic version of him saying it's the original. And yeah, it's a bunch of retcons put in here, but I don't mind it too much. It was interesting to see and sets up some interesting storylines. But yeah, really that's all I have to say about these 2 seasons. And they were both really solid. And I will be talking about the next season, depending on the time I have, either tomorrow or Thursday. And then the final season I'll be talking about also on Thursday. It really depends on the time I have to record today because I do have some things to do. But yeah, honestly, really, that's all I have planned. I want to know what you think, and I'll see you on the next episode of Legends and Theories. Thank you for watching this episode of Legends and Theories. Please subscribe, like the video, share the video, leave a comment, check out the video on screen, and may the Force be with you.